The Edith J. Carey Arboretum was established April 5, 1985. This is located in Harrisonburg on the campus of James Madison University. It is composed of 25 acres of land that are dedicated to botanical preservation and the natural wildlife. This land is home to many diverse species of animals and plants.
Animal species predominantly present in the pond are bass, catfish, koi, bluegill, goldfish, and turtles. Surrounding the pond and the woodland, there are 113 identified species of birds, and which include mallard ducks, hummingbirds, and hawks. The Arboretum is also bountiful in annual and perennial plant life, containing many species of wildflowers, trees, and other flowers.
The eastern painted turtle, Chrysamis picta, is an important species in this Arboretum pond. Native to North American waters, the turtle thrives in freshwater environments. These turtles had to acclimatize when first introduced to the Arboretum. They become accustomed to the natural state of the pond and its surroundings.
However, if we utilize a reciprocal transplant experiment in the pond, we can see if the turtles exhibited any local adaptation to the Arboretum, if moved to an environment differing in salinity or temperature of the pond, or any other environmental factor.
On the bank of the pond lies the willow tree, giving the turtles shade. This species of turtles are ectotherms, so their bodies get heat from their surroundings. They cool down with this shade and alternately bask on the bank of the pond to get heat.
The turtle's diet consists of plants, insects, living, and even dead organisms. This classifies them as heterotrophs, omnivores, and detritivores, which mean they get their food sources from dead and living things.
This is different from decomposers, which also decompose organic matter, but this name is exclusive for bacteria and fungi.
Between turtles, there is interspecific competition occurring for nesting space, food, and mating.
Painted turtles are idiroparous and have multiple reproductive cycles over the span of their lifetime. The turtles breed in the spring and dig nests for the eggs from May to July, with the eggs hatching before the period of hibernation in the winter. The oviposition of the turtle is especially interesting because the sex of the turtle is determined by temperature. Very warm nests lead to more females, and colder nests lead to more males. The clutch size of the turtle can range from 1 to 23 eggs, and this can result in a reproductive trade-off. Their body mass is larger when holding eggs, and the females need more heat from the sunlight to compensate for the extra mass. The energy of the females is also allocated to reproduction rather than growth, which can be problematic because the female will be instinctually focusing on her egg's growth rather than her own.
Turtles take part in a mutualistic relationship with algae on their turtle shells. They provide a substrate for the algae while also receiving a camouflage against predators. Algae can also be harmful because it can lead to a condition called shell rot, which is caused by either a fungi or bacteria. The water is already extremely muddy and coffee-colored due to the tannins as the leaves break down. This leaf fall input also contributes to the insect life and its conversion of terrestrial energy to aquatic energy. The algae on the turtle shell establish crypsis, which is the ability of an organism to avoid detection by others.
Evolution by natural selection occurs at the population level. The turtles could potentially evolve to be immune to the bacteria or fungi that lead to shell rot. The survivors will pass on their genes to the next generation, and maybe, eventually, the population will be shell rot free.
Theoretically, because of the flooding that occurs in the Shenandoah Valley, the turtles could potentially be washed away from the small pond in the Arboretum into the main pond that has different characteristics. Allopatry would then take place as turtles, due to a dramatic effect, speciate due to these different circumstances. Alternatively, sympatry would take place if somehow the painted turtle population were isolated and diverged into two species, open water feeding and bottom feeding populations. These are just plausible scenarios, but probably not necessarily happen like this, but they could.
The survivorship curve for the eastern painted turtle is a type 2 curve. With this type of survivorship curve, there is an equal probability of death for all ages. There is a high number of young individuals in this curve, which shows that there are new generations to replace the dying individuals. This curve is linear and has a negative slope.
The fundamental niche of the eastern painted turtle includes plants in the pond, grass, abiotic and biotic organisms in the pond, and everything else in the Arboretum that could potentially be used as food for the turtles.
The realized niche is made up of the area in close proximity to the pond, as it provides most of the turtles with food and shelter. This exhibits niche differentiation because the turtles would never be able to fulfill their fundamental niche because of competition, predators, and other factors that are present in the Arboretum.
A possible manipulative field experiment around the pond would be to reduce the catfish population and see how the pond environment, specifically the turtles, responds to this manipulation. We could also try this with the koi population, thus performing a second manipulative experiment. If we compare these two results together to see which fish population impacts the turtles the most, this would be called a comparative field experiment.
A natural field experiment that we could test in the pond would be to capture the turtles, measure them, and create a survivorship curve for this specific turtle population in the Arboretum pond. This would be a natural field experiment because we are just taking measurements for the pond turtles and not disrupting the turtle population.
The painted turtles of the Arboretum compete against other species that inhabit the pond. Catfish and turtles compete for the bottom food sources at the bottom of the pond, which is called interspecific competition. This could lead to exploitation of these food sources that would be deleterious for both populations. The most applicable model that can be observed and used in the pond would be the Locta-Volterra predator-prey model. These equations could be used to visualize the outcomes of competition between the painted turtle and the species they interact with. The competition coefficient denoted by alpha in either 2:1 or 1:2 would show the effect of the turtles on, say, the catfish or vice versa. Even though competition does occur, coexistence is most likely prevalent because both species are below their carrying capacity in the pond, meaning that both populations can grow. However, if the populations move above their carrying capacities, they both will decline back on the equilibrium together.
Both the community of the Arboretum organisms and the physical environment make up their ecosystem. The pond is man-made with non-native introduced species with an above-average input of unnatural pollutants from the nearby JMU campus, roads, and other assorted buildings. The abiotic factors of the environment include the water temperature, pH, the rocks, as well as the nutrients in the air, water, and soil. The food web of the Arboretum pond shows the transfer of energy to and from each trophic level. In the Arboretum pond, the occasional masked bandit is the top predator, preying on duck eggs, turtle eggs, and young, and even fish, frogs, or crayfish if he can catch them. Second to the raccoons, piscivorous birds like herons, osprey, kingfishers, and so on make up the next tier. In the actual pond, turtles are on top. Largemouth bass and catfish are next preying upon minnows, young bluegill, and other small vertebrates and invertebrates. Koi are stocked in the pond, and with the other fish, eat the vegetation and plankton in the water column. Ultimately, the energy comes from the sun and is converted into biomass by either terrestrial or aquatic plants, or phytoplankton. The turtles in the Arboretum pond have a logistic growth curve, which has an S shape to it. This is because the catfish limit the number of turtles in the pond because of competition for food and other resources. If we were to remove the catfish from the pond, we could possibly see an exponential growth curve because there would be no other organisms that could limit the turtles' growth or reproduction.
Turtles and catfish compete for the same food source. Therefore, if all environmental factors are held constant in the Arboretum, then these two species cannot coexist at constant population values. One species will outcompete the other for any necessary resources for that population, while the other species will decrease in number due to the limiting resources. This is called the competitive exclusion principle, or Gauss's law.
Predator and prey populations have a tendency to cycle. For example, a large population of painted turtles would consume large numbers of their prey population, aquatic vegetation. This would then decrease the prey population of vegetation, and the turtles would also decrease in numbers, leading to the oscillating pattern shown here.
In accordance with the optimal foraging theory, the turtles must learn about the distribution of food in their environment. They spend their winters hibernating in the mud of the pond bottom, but in the other seasons must eat the most productive food in respect to nutrition and handling time. As omnivores, they have a vast array of available food items in and around the pond and are able to leave the pond in search of food, probably giving them an advantage over their strictly aquatic competitors. Painted turtles are well adapted to living among people and thus do well in the Arboretum pond. The isolated forest is likely a population source for surrounding areas as most natural predators of the turtles are absent from the edge of campus. Cars and dogs are their biggest threats, as well as consuming human trash. Many turtles encountered during our day in the Arboretum were as big or bigger than their listed max size, indicating they are in a very good environment.
Because of this, their conservation status is of least concern.
Turtles are a great species to consider in discussing the Arboretum pond. They are amphibious, meaning they utilize both the land and the water of their environment.
Mostly eating, sheltering in the water while nesting, and basking on the land, they are able to migrate between bodies of water, allowing them to find new food sources when they become depleted. As amphibious species, they outline the nitrogen cycle and carbon cycle, as both sources ebb back and forth between aquatic and terrestrial environments. The leaf and woody debris input, in turn, feeds aquatic insect larvae. The aquatic insect larvae feeds fish or can emerge as flying insects. These insects pollinate terrestrial plants and then feed birds in the surrounding forest. The insects could also fall back into the water only to be eaten by the fish. These fish are then eaten by the turtles, bigger fish, or birds, and then expelled as broken down sources of carbon and nitrogen ready to be used again in this circle of life.